Hello everyone, it's Old Guardian here. It's only a few more days before Scholomance Academy, the next expansion to Hearthstone, is coming, and in the most recent patch they were included the new deck recipes for all classes. So deck recipes provide some insight maybe into what sort of archetypes Blizzard is thinking might be viable in the upcoming meta. They are typically not the best of decks, but there have been some pretty good ones like Galakrond Shaman, for example. Back in Descent of Dragons, and before all the nerfs, it was a really strong deck, so there have been some gems among the deck archetypes previously. But what about this time? Let's take a look at the 10 deck recipes that Blizzard has put in the client. And first of them, the Warrior. Bad to the bone. Bad. And they are... well, they are probably the bad, I would say. Maybe this works, but this is a Big Warrior. Big Warrior has not been a viable deck. I know that I think Dexter it was who built one version of this Dimensional Repair Warrior, but when the stats came in it wasn't that great. I mean, cards just don't exist to make it great. But what about now? There's also Commencement, the Warrior Paladin dual class card. Summon a minion from your deck, give it Taunt and Divine Shield. Then there's the Ceremonial Maul, which allows you to get some Taunt minions on the board. There's like Information, gives you some Taunt minions, because you don't have any small minions in your deck some early game. Is there something to this? I really don't think there is, but this is what Blizzard is offering you. Then there's the Shaman deck. Then the Shaman deck is a Spell Shaman. Spell damage and burn. And yeah, I do think this looks like a potential archetype for Scholomance Academy, although I don't think it's going to look like this. This seems like a very slow version of the deck. It runs stuff like Sorcerer's Substitute, 6 mana 6/6, and then you might even get 2 of these. And Frost Whisper at the end of your turn, deal 1 damage to all enemies. Maybe these slower cards have some place in the meta, but the meta might also turn out to be faster than these can handle. Other than that, there is some burn available. There's Lightning Bloom for some innervate action, and then there's Lightning Bolts, Lava Bursts, Molten Blast, Serpentine Portals. There's a lot of burn for Shaman. So I think this archetype is going to look really interesting in the upcoming expansion, but this particular version of the archetype looks a little bit slow. Then the Rogue deck. I think this Rogue deck, if we were to pit all of these recipe decks against each other, I think this Rogue deck, this would just rob the bank and blow everything else out of the water. Looking sharp, using Secret Passage, amazing card. And then so much weapon stuff. It's an aggro weapon rogue, self-sharpening swords, hooked scimitars, full paradoxin blade, steel dancers. Stuff just hits the board, big weapons, and they go to the dome and boom. Then there's also sap, so that even if your opponent happens to get something on the way, sap it away and go face again. Overall, I think this one looks the most promising of all the recipes. There's still a few changes I would make. I wouldn't play something like a Bloodsail Flypooter, for example. But this deck, even in this form, might be good enough to take on the ladder. Then there's the Paladin deck recipe, and it's a big Paladin, it's a dual Paladin. Summon big minions from decks, they fight. And dual Paladin really has not had a good time lately. But again, they are adding this big support for both Warrior and for Paladin. For example, this Ceremonial Maul. Spell burst, summon a student with Taunt, and that's equal to the spell's cost, so that one, you hit into something, you cast some spells, you get some Taunt minions, you survive a little bit longer in order to do this dual stuff. I will be amazed if this works, but this is something that Blizzard is trying to push. And big stuff doesn't end there. This rather hilarious take of Hunter is... yeah, this will be too slow. This will absolutely be too slow. Maybe there's something to this, because like Death Rattle Hunter, there are some really interesting Death Rattle Hunter cards in the expansion, like the Bloated Python, like the Teacher's Pet. Then there's the Guardian Animals, which I think is more of a Druid thing than Hunted thing, but yeah, maybe. But this one is packed with Beastmaster Leorox, King Crush, and 2 copies of Nagrand Slam. There's never been a Hunter deck that has been able to afford running 2 copies of Nagrand Slam. Even if there weren't Highlander synergies, no deck could simply do that, so it's a little bit hilarious how slow of a meta you would have to have for this deck to actually be viable. But here we go. Blizzard wants big stuff. The bigger, the better. Speaking of big stuff, the Druid deck... What is this stuff even? Survival of the Fittest. Give +4/+4 to all minions in your hand, deck, and battlefield. And then there's Uziel Windsinger. Your spells cost 1. So you play Uziel, and you play Lightning Boom, and you play something like a Guardian Animals, you pull some stuff, and then you play Survival of the Fittest, and your Uziel becomes a 9/9, and your beast that you just summoned becomes some 9/8s, and then they boom, hit things, and... But... That's a take on this big Druid archetype. And then there's even King Faris in the mix, so you can play King Faris. If you happen to have any Survival of the Fittests in hand, then you can just summon some 10 drops, and then next turn you can drop the Survival of the Fittest. And this... How does this stuff live long enough? I mean, against each other, I guess they're going to have some bigger and bigger green men punching at each other, but oh boy. While other classes play Warlock kills. So, Warlock, Zoo deck, rather peculiar take on Zoo though. It's a Zoo deck, but it runs stuff like School Spirit, so because it runs everything that can generate soul fragments. It runs Sociologist Militia. Then there's Expired Merchants and Hand of Gul'dan, but also Sociologists, so you may end up discarding that, but then you get 2 Sociologists back, and then you could try to abuse that mechanic. A very strange take on Zoo. I would bet that if I could take just a discard Zoo against this, then the discard Zoo would just kill this way before this gets much done, but this might be enough to kill that big stuff, because the big stuff gets going. I don't even know. The mage deck is an interesting one. This is a Cyclone mage, and I think that there's something to this Cyclone mage with the Mosagi Master Duelist, and potentially with Potion of Illusion. You might even be able to set up some fancy OTKs. You get a 1-mana Mosagi into your hand and 1-mana Sorcerer's Apprentice into your hand, and then you play those and a bunch of cheap spells, and then you push phase, and that might even end up killing people. Other than that, it's just spells and random spells, and they fly here and they fly there and they fly everywhere, and then there's Mana Cyclone that gives you even more random spells, and so many spells. Well, the deck is called Casting Competition after all, so yeah, I don't know about this exact take on the deck, but I do have some faith in this archetype. It can be interesting. As for the Priest deck, it's a Priest deck that aims to win games, and that's something that I really like to see. I have been expecting Tempo Priest from this expansion because of Frazzled Freshman and Powered Feast. Frazzled Freshman, that's as sticky as 1-drops go with 4 health. And then it survives on the board, and it's ready to get Powered Feasted next turn, takes the trade, gets healed back to full. What's there not to like? I have really high expectations of this sort of Tempo Priest to actually be viable, with the Veil Weavers, with the Overseers, with the Apotheoses. I don't know about the gift, and I don't really know about the Brittlebone Destroyers in this archetype. But there are some really interesting tools that can be used here, and Priest finally having a win condition is of course very interesting. Finally, there's the Demon Hunter deck, and Blizzard is trying to tell us that hey, Demon Hunter could actually play like a little bit slower, but nah, they won't. They won't. Haha. They are going to use Marrow Slicer, and they are going to use the Soul Shard Lapidary, and they are going to use these to hit you in the face, and hit you in the face with early game minions, hit you in the face with these, just hit you in the face all the time, and by turn 7 you're dead. So this deck runs stuff like Sociologist Militia, Coilfang Warlord, Netrandamus, which of course is totally unnecessary, because the opponents would be dead. So why would you put these cards in your deck? Or alternatively, Demon Hunter could put in like Chaos Novas and Macteridon and Philosophy, and then have Macteridon and Macteridon and Macteridon, which would be an interesting alternative, but it also wouldn't do things like this deck does. So there's a strange amalgamation between just doing what Demon Hunter wants to do and trying to show that hey, actually it could like maybe do some other stuff too. But yeah, it maybe can, but I don't think it can do it like this. Overall, it's fun to take a look at what sort of archetypes Blizzard is pushing, and they're demonstrating that hey, these classes could be played like this. The deck recipes are never really meant to be the competitive versions of the decks, although there have been some really good ones in the mix during various expansions. And for this expansion, if I had to pick one of these deck recipes that I think is actually something that you could play on ladder, then it would be the rogue deck, this looking sharp. This aggro. Aggro is always good. And there are a bunch of aggro tools coming in the expansion, so I have a lot of faith in decks like this one. In just a few days we get to play the game ourselves and see how it goes, and I'm really looking forward to that.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the show, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel for more.